Network contributor Jenny Horn, because I want to spend as much time as we can here talking streaming. There is always something to talk about with this space here, Jenny, as we've now sort of seen this become a two-horse race in the sense that Netflix and Disney have kind of separated themselves from the pack.
Absolutely, and I think that Disney owning Hulu and ESPN Plus really only strengthens it, because typically you think Disney, Disney Plus, but really their catalog now of content has gotten so expansive. And we can't forget, actually, Amazon just announcing to acquire MGM Studios for about $8 billion, sort of tightening the race in this competition to be one of the largest and most beloved streaming, companies. But what I think is really interesting about this deal are sort of the mixed reactions, how it will affect a Netflix, a Disney Plus. And actually, many are saying there might not be that great of an impact, because MGM Studios, as we know, is iconic in Hollywood, but a lot of its value seems to sort of be missing. For example, it's best known for James Bond, but it doesn't even fully own the rights to actually the Bond franchise. Another thing is popular titles like Wizard of Oz isn't even owned by MGM Studios anymore. It's actually now owned by Warner Brothers. So MGM, while it's a big deal, and I think that it impacts, of course, Amazon Prime Video, there's just, they don't necessarily churn out modern day content anymore, which is what so many people are focused on. Right now, I think content is sort of key. And we're seeing, Netflix actually sort of stuck range bound following their first quarter earnings when they reported subscriber fatigue, because people are now leaving their homes and not binge watching TV anymore, which I actually think is a good thing. And I can echo that sentiment, because it's been beautiful this week in Chicago. I actually haven't turned on Netflix once, and I think that this is being reflected in a broader way. But so many people are saying that the key for Netflix to grow now, because of course we're returning to this new normal, is to push out the best and the newest content and have a more creative approach really with its pricing, because this pricing power sort of only exists if Netflix can continue to build out a compelling library of content and consistently have a track record of pushing out hit series and also hit movies, which I read an analyst report today that the analyst believes that they do not actually do that. Granted, they have very popular names over the last year like The Crown, The Queen's Gambit, Bridgerton, that have done very well. But for every hit series, there's about 7 that you see on Netflix that aren't doing so well. Typically, when I see a Netflix original movie, I skip over it because I know it's not typically going to be good. That is an issue that has to be sort of fixed here. So a lot of analysts are just saying, given the content on Netflix right now, they're not impressed that the company is spending between the high teens and billions of dollars to upgrade their content. Now, one of the areas I think a lot of these companies, Disney, Amazon, Netflix, are all looking to expand in is internationally. Netflix specifically has really, really worked on increasing its presence by growing to being available in over 190 countries, and also working on different projects across countries like Mexico, Spain, Italy, Germany, just to name a few, and then also offering a lower tier mobile app in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. So I think they are working on that international growth. It's just a matter of how they stack up to Disney. And Disney is also potentially going to be a beneficiary as we reopen and as movie theaters reopen, because they do have a hand in that space, whereas of course Netflix does not. But our first tweet today sort of talks about the subscriber growth, which has been an issue on so many investors' mind really since the first quarter, which says Netflix added 36 million subscribers in full year 2020, but Netflix in the first quarter of 2021 added only 4 million compared to 16 million in last year, significantly decreasing its subscriber growth. Subscribers added in follow first quarter. Now it goes on to say the first quarter of 2021 is 4 million, first quarter of 2020 is 16 million, first quarter of 2019, 10 million, and first quarter of 2018 is 5 million. And actually, what I think is the most comparable here is the first quarter of 2021 to the first quarter of 2019, because I don't know how we possibly compare 2020 to these other years when people were at home with really nothing else to do. So I would say the first quarter of 2019 having 10 million subscribers compared to 4 million, that is concerning to me. But our next tweeter talks about just this competition, what we always talk about in this space. We are in the streaming race. It feels like we have been for now a few years. So our next tweeter says, an even bigger problem seems to be growing competition. With the MGM deal, Amazon, Netflix, and Disney are the biggest streaming services out there. Yet Disney has tons of timeless intellectual property, and Amazon has the ability to cross-package other services. don't know how Netflix competes in the long run. So what I have to say here is, although I did say, I read this report that said Netflix's original series aren't great, I have to say that some of this last year speaks for itself. Netflix has consistently dominated at these award shows. I mean, so I would say that then attracts more talent in terms of actresses and actors, and then now they're getting better directors. So I will say that in some ways, yes, I agree with the analysts that say they need to work on their original content, but also if you look at some of their accolades over the last year, it speaks for themselves. And we've been talking, for years now about Disney and Amazon creeping into this mix, but yet Netflix continues to dominate. And for that, I think we have to give them some credit, Kevin.
Jenny, you make a great point about this time of the year on the calendar and less people sitting and watching television. That's why, think about back in your history. That's why legacy TV channels and stations are running reruns at this time of the year, right? They run their big things in the fall and winter, and then now they run those over again in reruns. So that's not a big stretch that the overall viewership is going down. Now, Jenny, here's where it gets interesting. Just because you're not watching enough Netflix, are you canceling Netflix? The answer to that most likely is no, right? There's a big difference between not watching and canceling your subscriptions. Now, some people will, but I think a lion's share won't cancel their subscription because there's a big difference. Because viewership always goes down in the summer when more people are outside and doing other things. But I don't think that's as significant. It's more seasonal than just a major problem with these streaming services. So though I see that as a true fact that overall viewership is going down, I don't see that as a big problem because most of these legacy TV stations are just gearing up for late summer and fall anyway, guys.
Well said, Nate. Kev, I would say too, if you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 of these different streaming packages, is Netflix the first or is it the last one that's canceled? And I think there's an argument to say that for many it would be the last one canceled, and so some of its competitors could be the ones at risk of that this summer. We'll see. Jenny, great setup as always. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. Look forward to talking to you again soon. As we say goodbye to Jenny, I want to welcome in the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Landon Swan, to the program here. And Landon, I hate to disagree with the tweets or even with some of what Jenny is saying here, but I would just say that, for those who question Netflix content lineup, quality or not, maybe you're just a little bit out of touch with the customer base because this company is executing well, and maybe the attention span of the younger generation just a little bit lower. They're a little bit shorter. We just watch things and we forget about it. We don't need these epic movies coming out, every 2 years that maybe Disney can deliver on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I agree. I think Netflix does really well with series and it does less well with movies, and probably the reverse for Disney. Disney's killing it on movies. Series are kind of light, but that's also because they're new to the game on series. They instantly imported 50 or 100 years worth of movies into their library, and so they have a huge movie base to choose from, and they're just get going on the series. What's interesting is that in about a year and a half or maybe 16 months, something like that, Disney has caught up to about half of what Netflix is in subscribers. So think about how long it took Netflix to build their subscriber base up to around 200 million. Disney has already jumped up to 100 million in that short amount of time. So they're definitely the second horse in this 2-horse race. Although I would agree, Amazon, trying to make a bid, it has always sort of fallen behind these two major players, but it's trying to get up there. But I kind of want to take a little bit of different direction. Instead of comparing these two against each other, which I think we could do all day, let's kind of answer some of the questions around, is there room for both of them? I think everyone knows the answer is yes, but let's quantify it a little bit. So if you look at people talking about using streaming services just in general, all of them combined, we've actually seen a significant increase that started obviously right as the pandemic hit. Everyone started watching more shows, but instead of reverting back to the mean as things started opening up, it's actually hitting all-time highs right now. Streaming is up 73% year over year. And if you think about when we're comparing that to June of last year, just 2 or 3 months into the pandemic when everyone's locked at home, that should be a really high number, but it's actually up since then. So we'll see as the weather gets better across the United States and as the more things opening up. I really hope that begins to dip, but it just kind of goes to show you that there's been a shift in behavior where people are far more used to streaming, and there's actually more people out there. Don't forget, not everyone has cut the cord yet. There's a lot of people still using cable. So this chart kind of reflects that, a lot of people shifting over from the old cable model or satellite into streaming. And so I think obviously that's going to be good for both Disney and Netflix. And then if you look at subscription fatigue, so this is when people are talking about, I've got too many subscriptions to streaming. I've got to cut something. Whatever it may be. And I agree, probably Netflix is not the top of the list of things you would cut. But if you look at this one, it's actually down 36% year over year. So again, a few months into the pandemic, people signed up for a lot of new things. You'd think that, subscription fatigue would just be kicking off. And now a year later, you're like, all right, everything's opening up. Surely people are canceling. No, that's not the case. They're not canceling. I think it's just become the norm. When people used to pay 40 or 50 bucks a month for cable, Netflix is 14, Disney's 7. Those two get you a ton of shows, and you're still only half of what you were paying with cable. So I think that there's a lot of room for multiple winners, and I don't think it's an either-or situation. That being said, all the stats that Jenny brought up about Netflix bringing in new subscribers being low, we completely agree. LikeFolio data shows, especially in the U.S., as we focus on English only, the purchase intent is very, very low for Netflix, and that is people joining up, not using, but joining up. And so that was the lowest we've seen in a long time. And if you look at people specifically talking about canceling, the cancellation rates are way down year over year, 46% down for Netflix year over year, Disney negative 37%. So this is less people talking about canceling these two services. So overall, the picture that I'm painting is that there is a lot of room. A lot of people are watching shows on streaming, and I think that there's plenty of room for Netflix, Disney, even Amazon and others. And of course, with Disney being the owner of ESPN and Hulu, I think all of that can still fit in someone's budget, and I just don't think they're going to cancel. At least that's what the data is showing right now.
Yeah, Landon, a couple of quick points. Number one, I think Disney and their ease in adaptation in the United States, their ease that they've built up the numbers, I think they owe Netflix a tip of the hat because of that. Because as you know,
100%.
The first one through the wall always gets the bloodiest, right? That second guy he gets to walk through easy. So I think the access to these streamers and the streamers' ability to sign up, they've already done it through Netflix. So it was a much easier process than the first time you sign up. So I think once Netflix started streaming, they were the pioneers. So it's not really surprising to me that Disney was able to, take all those young viewers that might have an interest that were already probably doing Netflix and get them into streaming. Then another good reason, like Andy explained, LikeFolio's data yesterday and really cleared up some foggy points. You just cleared up foggy points today in your data today, because I looked at subscription fatigue and I saw that the numbers going down, and I thought the opposite of what the actual data was. When I think mentions of fatigue, which means actually more positive. And when I looked at this, I thought it was more a negative data point on Netflix, when the reality is mentions of fatigue are down, which means that's more positive. So both your data points are really positive for this streaming space, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So this is the subscription fatigue is someone saying, I've got too many subscriptions, I need to cancel. That number of people is decreasing, which obviously is positive for companies that require on retained users and getting that monthly fee. I want to go back to your point. This is interesting. You talked about how Disney benefited from Netflix being first through the door and getting the adoption and getting people over from cable, cutting the cord and getting a Roku device and all of that. I completely agree that Netflix made that a frictionless transition for many, many users. However, it also worked the other way. A lot of people, I think Disney hit on a little bit older demographic, or more the more family oriented as opposed to the millennials. And when they launched their free subscriptions with Verizon, when they first launched, That was actually the biggest purchase intent spike that we had for Roku, and it was one of the biggest purchase intent spikes we had for Netflix, because people said, all right, I've got free Disney. How do I use it? And then they looked it up. They said, oh, I got to get a Roku. All right, get a Roku TV, a Roku device, got that. And as soon as they logged onto that, they said, oh, this is where I can get Netflix too? Really cool. And so it's like, it goes both ways. Both of these companies are benefiting each other and just bringing more people into streaming overall.
Landon, I wish we could continue this conversation because there's just so much to talk about here, but really, really great presentation, really great explanation of all the data. And really, I think posing these two companies more as peers on the same team as opposed to direct competitors, at least at this point. Have a great weekend. The co-founder of LikeFolio.com. It is always a pleasure. We'll catch up next week. All right, Kev.